Hey everyone, today I have a Maytag top-load washing machine and I want to show you how to deal with the fact that it is not draining water properly. You may get different information on the display here using the diagnostic mode on this type, or there are a few different models this is going to apply for. Typically the error code with that is the F9E1 code, but at any rate we are going to go through 5 or 6 different things on this machine to try to determine if the drain pump's bad or if it's something else, and then I'll show you how to replace that at an affordable cost. Check the description for the drain pump that this kind of machine uses. There's a few different types that they could use, but there are universal pumps that are a fraction of the cost of the Whirlpool or Maytag OEM, so make sure to check the description for those parts, and let's go ahead and begin on this video.
First, let's try a few basic things to get out of the way first. The drain hose itself, for example. Make sure that there are no kinks in the hose or damage to it that could prevent the water from going from the hose into the drain pipe. Next, check the actual depth of the hose in your standpipe or drain pipe. On most models, you'll have a crook in the pipe so it doesn't go in too far, but if you don't have that crook or the hose has been altered, you want to make sure that it doesn't stick in more than 8 inches into the standpipe. Any more than that and you could have siphoning issues. Also make sure that the standpipe isn't too close to the floor, as the drain hose on most washing machines needs to be suspended about 30 inches from the floor to drain properly as well. Next, any other work we attempt is going to be on the washing machine itself, so if the washer is full of water, you need to empty it. A trick that usually works is by lowering the drain hose into a bucket near the floor itself, as low to the ground as possible. If the hose is lower than the tub or near it, much of the water is going to drain away from the washer into the bucket, making your job a lot easier. Alternatively, you could remove the hose from the washing machine itself, but using the hose itself should be enough. Next, we want to lay the washing machine on its side to access the drain pump system to inspect it. Turn off the water valves, remove the water hoses, and reposition the washing machine so you can lay it down on its side. Make sure to tape the lid with painters or masking tape so it doesn't open when you lay it down as well. Next, gently lower the washing machine on its side. One note is that even though I tried to drain as much water as I could, there still was a little bit that wanted to leak out once the washer was laid on its side. So it was super handy that I had this bucket nearby. Next, locate the drain pump system in the lower right corner of the washing machine. Your orientation may be different than this one, but it's pretty clear where the drain pump is and what it's going to do. One thing to initially check is the drain pump wire going from the control console to the pump, as well as the wire trunk underneath. Make sure that the harness is plugged in properly and that the wires aren't frayed or damaged anywhere on the trunk that could prevent the pump from operating correctly. If that's okay, it's time to check the pump itself. To get the drain pump removed, you need a pair of slip-jawed pliers to remove the 2 hoses from the drain pump. Press in on the retaining clips and then move them away from the hose. Note that when I did this, there was still water in the hoses when I was removing them, so I had to have the bucket handy to catch the water from the pump. Before we get to the drain pump, it's also worth looking at the hoses that we've removed going from the pump to the tub. You'll use pliers again to pull it all off. Sometimes you can find objects or items trapped in this area going from the tub to the hose, and if you find any debris in it, you would want to clean it out with some needle nose pliers, or maybe even use some water to circulate and clean it out. Do the same thing with the black hose and inspect the inside of that now that it is removed as well. Next, I'm going to remove the drain pump itself. There are 3 screws on this pump, and the location of the 3 screws could vary slightly between each model of washing machine. You want to use a screwdriver with a 5/16 hex head to remove the 3 screws from the pump housing. Once you have all 3 of these screws removed, you'll need to gently remove the pump and pump hose off. Off the camera, I do have the water bucket underneath to catch all the water just for reference. Make sure that the pump is fully drained of water at this point too if you find any still in it. If you want to test the pump electronically, you can do this now, either isolated away from the machine, or you could have done it on the washing machine just the same, but I figured that taking it off would be easier for you to view to understand how to do it. Set your multimeter to ohms resistance or continuity, then press the leads of the multimeter on the spade connectors of the motor. As you can see here, it's getting 20 ohms of resistance, which is good. Generally, a pump like this will be between 7 and 25 ohms of resistance. However, often the ohm test will not truly show if the pump is defective. I'm going to take a drill gun with a Phillips drill bit and take the pump apart. It has a specialty housing bracket here that's held by 3 screws. And then once those 3 are removed, there's one final screw holding the pump onto the white bracket, and your assembly may look different or have a different number of screws with orientation, but they generally come apart all the same. From here, you can test the paddles on the pump, and this is the key. The impeller is driven by a magnet hidden in the motor. When you press on these paddles, you should get a significant amount of resistance on the motor, and it should spring very firmly back about 3 or 4 different segments as you spin it around. If your motor has a magnet that is broken on the inside of the impeller, then it will feel soft and is easily rotated with little or no resistance. If this happens, the motor is bad internally and needs replaced, even if the ohm meter shows that it's okay, and that's why we took it off the machine before I tested it with the ohm meter. Depending on the pump type and housing type, you can either buy a fully brand new assembled pump with the bracket and housing, or sometimes you can buy a universal pump that will simply fit onto the existing bracket and housings, and this tends to be a bit cheaper because you're just buying the motor, which is actually what's usually broken. It seems like this DP1 will actually work on this style Maytag washing machine, and I will have a link to it in the description as well as the whole pump replacement as well. At any rate though, you may have to reinstall the pump housing, and you can use this video as part of the guide on how to put it back together, but it really only fits one way back together. The key is making sure that the 4 screws fit back onto the pump housing, 3 from the bracket to the pump, and then 1 goes between the motor and white pump housing itself, as you see on the camera. Also make sure the white pump housing is oriented correctly with the motor, as it can install and rotate a few different ways, so make sure that it's going to fit back onto the washing machine with the hoses oriented properly. Before we reinstall the repaired or replaced pump, make sure to check the other hose that goes from the drain pump to the standpipe. It's rare that there could be an obstruction, but it is possible that it could have an obstruction preventing water from draining, and I can't really complete the video without mentioning that either. Go ahead then and reinstall the black hose onto the tub and secure it in place with the clamp. There are grooves on the hoses that you need to fit the clamps to make sure that they clamps down properly. Now go ahead and reinstall the drain pump screws to the housing. Note that the bracket itself has 4 holes for screws on it, so you need to make sure that you line them up with the holes on the tub, as that's how it mounts from the screws to the pump. This pump can only install one way to the tub though, with the 3 screws. Then make sure that the clamps are reseated perfectly onto the pump, and you're nearly done. Finally, make sure that the drain wire harnesses are snapped back into place. Make sure they don't bind or catch on any of the other wires or assemblies underneath the washing machine, and you're all done with this part of the diagnosis and test. And let's say that none of this actually worked on your pump. It's still either not draining entirely, or there is some sort of problem where it's not draining at all, even with a new pump. What's next? Generally, the next 2 things that could be at fault would either be the wires going to the pump that we didn't see underneath, or the board itself. You would want to watch my video on diagnosis and troubleshooting for this style washing machine to show you how to get this system into diagnosis and component testing. You may also want to test the computer system to see if it is outputting 120 VAC from the control board to the drain pump. If it wasn't actually doing this during the component testing mode, that would suggest that the board is bad if it can't again output 120 VAC. Otherwise, it would be a frayed wire between the board and pump, and that may be difficult to track down, and I don't have that in this video. But I hope that all these ideas are going to help you figure out how to replace your pump if that's what's wrong, and some other ideas on your washing machine. Make sure to check the description and comments for links to other videos, as well as those pumps that we would use to replace if that's what indeed was bad on this washing machine. And I hope this video helps you out. Have a great day.